Well, this morning, we are continuing our sermon series entitled An Unexpected Christmas. And this morning, we're in our third week of the series, The Unexpected Christmas. And if you recall, over the last several weeks, we've been taking a look at the Gospel of Matthew. In fact, it's been the first chapter of the Gospel of Matthew, the genealogy of the Gospel. And we've been pointing out some of those kind of unexpected characters, the people that you see there in the Gospel message that Matthew makes a point out of identifying. That, you know what, in all honesty, at no other time would we really talk about them or bring them in. You know, I've never done it, but you know, I find it'd be interesting to take a look at your genealogy, to see your family line, to go all the way back through history. I bet if you did your genealogy, it would be neat to find some really cool people out there that you were related to, wouldn't it? It'd be neat to sit back and maybe you're part of royalty. You got a family line that goes back to royalty, or somebody who made a big impact in our world. But then again, if you really think about it, if you do your family genealogy and you look at the family line and there's not some cool people out there, those kind of people, you know what? Some of those maybe dubious kind of characters, we're just going to simply want to ignore them, aren't we? We're not going to want to focus on them. We're not going to want to talk about them. We just want to pass them by and ignore them. Well, we said over the last several weeks that Matthew, when he was doing the genealogy of Jesus, it's like he almost went out of his way at times to bring in some of these people, to talk about some of these people that we, in any other point in time, we would simply ignore them. We would not want to admit that we were related to them in any way. And if we were related to them, we surely wouldn't be talking about it. But Matthew goes out of his way to identify these people as being in the direct line of the descendancy of Jesus. Now, why in the world would he do that? Well, once again, just in way of recap, don't forget, back in that day, just like it is today in the church today, for many people, church is law-oriented, where they kind of point their bony fingers and say, you've got to be doing this, and you've got to be doing that, and you've got to be behaving this way, and if you do those things, then you know what? Then you're righteous. It's that self-righteous works kind of train of thought. And we think to ourselves, if only I can behave this way, then you know what? God has got to look upon me with favor. It's kind of like that old, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me, and so God, you've got to bless me. Because I'm good enough and I'm smart enough and I do these good things, God, you've got to look upon me with favor. You've got to bless my household. You've got to bless my occupation. And you've got to bless my family. Give me good things. After all, God, I'm following the law. I'm doing every rule just as you call me to do. And so I should be blessed. But Matthew says, you're getting this wrong. Matthew's going to say, no. That's not the way that it is. And Matthew is sharing this story with us. This new way, it's not really a new way of thinking. It's basically, Matthew is trying to reiterate what God originally intended. And so we go to the genealogy of Jesus, found in Matthew chapter 1. Remember this? It says, a record of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers. Remember Judah and his brothers selling off Joseph and all that kind of good thing? It goes on to say, and Judah the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. Okay, we just got done talking about Tamar and what she did and how God kept her in the family line. Okay, but then if we fast forward just a couple of verses, if we fast forward to verse number 5, it says, Salmon was the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. And we remember Rahab, don't we? You see, when Matthew wrote this, and the Jewish readers read it, they knew exactly who Rahab was. Without a shadow of a doubt, they all knew the story of Rahab. They knew what Rahab was and how Rahab made their living, and they would have been completely appalled at the fact that Matthew would have included her in the genealogy. You see, Rahab had a label. Now, you know what? There's many people out there with labels, right? I want you to help me out here. There is John the Baptist, right? How about Uriah? Oh, come on. Uriah the Hittite, right? Uriah the Hittite. How about Attila the Hun? How about Alexander the Great? Or how about Conan? Or Buffy? Or one of my all-time favorites, Jabba? Yeah, that's right. And then there was Rahab the Rahab the prostitute. It's kind of interesting because the King James Version says Rahab the harlot. But Rahab, if you're reading the NIV, it's Rahab the prostitute. I mean, Rahab had a label. And she was known throughout the community. Rahab would have been ostracized. She would have been shunned. She would have been cast out from the presence of everybody. No one would have wanted to talk to her or eat with her or communicate with her in any way because otherwise they would have been deemed to be unclean. And so Rahab was the outcast of society. So why in the world would Matthew see the need to include her in the genealogy of Jesus? Because she is the point of the story. It's the point of the story that Matthew was about to tell. Let's go back to the book of Joshua and learn about Rahab. In Joshua chapter 1, Moses had just died. God says to this young military commander, Joshua, he has been serving as Moses' aide. And God says, Joshua, you're the one. You're the one, Joshua, who's going to lead my chosen people into the promised land. And so Joshua, standing before Israel, is standing on the eastern edge of the Jordan River. The Jordan River was at flood stage. In some places, the Jordan River could have been a mile wide at flood stage. And the people that Joshua was leading wasn't some small group of people. The historians will say there was anywhere between 1.8 and 2.2 million people that he was leading into the promised land. And don't forget how much grief they gave Moses all of those years in the desert. The constant uprising, the constant complaining, the constant going off on their own way regardless of how God called them to live or which way God called them to travel. And so Joshua takes command. And I love it because one of the very first things that God says to Joshua, in Joshua chapter 1, verse 7, be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. I mean, do you get, first and foremost, God says to Joshua 1, I'm going to be with you. And he says here in verse 7, be strong and very courageous. And he says, be careful to follow my word. Be careful, Joshua, to not turn to the right or to the left, but follow my word. Listen to me. Don't turn from it. Meditate on it day and night. Don't let it leave your lips. But follow my word. So what? So that you may be successful wherever you go. So his first challenge is, Joshua, be strong, be courageous, follow my word, and don't turn from it. And so Joshua, sitting on the edge of the promised land. First and foremost, he's sitting there and he decides, you know what? I'm going to send 2 spies into the promised land. Okay, remember the 10 before? This time they only send 2. Okay, guys, I want you to go in. I want you to spy out the promised land. Especially pay attention to Jericho. Jericho was a fortified city, about 5 to 6 miles in from the Jordan River. It had these springs that were all around the city walls and even within the city walls. So Jericho could have subsisted for a long time. They could have closed up the walls, they could have defended themselves and fought off any attacker for a very long period of time. The name Jericho actually means moon god. It was the center of worship to the moon god, which was one of the great gods of the Canaanites. And so the spies go in to spy out the land and especially give particular attention to the city of Jericho. So they sneak into the city of Jericho to spy it out. Well, some people see them. They go and they tell the king, King, we just saw some people coming in to spy out the land, and they went into Rahab's house. Well, the king responds, he says, well, send some messengers over to Rahab's house and tell her to give up these spies, to give up these people. I don't know why he did that. I don't know why he didn't just send a cohort of soldiers in to kick in the door. Maybe they're afraid who they're going to find in there. Who knows? But they go to Rahab's house, and Rahab says to the guys, no. They came, they were strangers, I didn't know who they were, they left. They already went out the city gates before they closed up for the night. So if you send a posse after them now, maybe you'll catch them. In reality, Rahab hid the spies on her roof, under some bushes. We go to Joshua chapter 2, verse 8. Before the spies lay down for the night, she, Rahab, went up on the roof and said to them, I know that the Lord has given this land to you. Now, stop right there. I love that, the Lord. Okay, in the NIV, if you see Lord capitalized L-O-R-D, what it is, it's the name Yahweh. It's the proper name of God. The most holy of names. The name that was honored and revered. And here, you get that? Here, Rahab is, we don't know what language she was communicating in the spies with, or if there was an interpreter or whatever there was. But here, Rahab says, I know that Yahweh, that the God who always was, the God who is now, and the God who always will be, has given this land to you, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord, Yahweh, dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the two kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard of it, our hearts melted and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on earth below. Look at that profession of faith. She's saying, you know what? We've heard of your God's faithfulness. We heard how your God rescued you out of slavery in Egypt. We heard how your God dried up the Red Sea and you crossed on dry ground, and how the Egyptian military was swallowed up. We heard how your God has sustained you in the wilderness all of these years. And we heard how your God defeated the two kings east of the Jordan River. And so she says, for the Lord your God, look at that profession. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on earth below. She's saying, I know, we know that your God is the Lord